So you sent us this lecture series, and I have to be completely honest with you.
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, well, when I first looked at the stack of notes containing G.A. Parwez's analysis, I assumed we were in for, a really dense theology lesson.
Right, because of the source material.
Exactly. The source material revolves around a foundational religious text. Specifically, we're talking about verses 59 through 62 of Surah Al-Furqan.
And usually when we encounter these kinds of ancient verses, the analysis is, it's draped in mysticism.
Right.
Or sentimentality. Or just traditional preaching.
Traditional preaching, yeah. But what we found as we really dug into your request is something entirely different. Like, we are looking at a literal masterclass in systems engineering.
It's wild. It's socioeconomic architecture, essentially.
Yeah, and that really threw me off at first.
It really is a radically different approach to ancient texts. I mean, Parwez completely strips away all the emotional and mystical baggage that usually, accompanies these passages.
He just ignores the magic entirely?
Totally.
Yeah.
He approaches this not as a collection of magical incantations or spiritual poetry, but as a cold, sharp, rational blueprint.
Like an operating manual.
Exactly. He reads it as an operating manual for civilizational survival, like what makes a society functional versus what inevitably leads to its collapse.
And so that is the mission for this deep dive. We are going to explore the universe not as a magical realm susceptible to, human begging, but as a rigid, law-governed operating system.
A strict machine.
Right. Think about when you buy a new computer. There's an underlying architecture to it. You don't negotiate with the code to make it run your applications faster.
Right? You sound crazy talking to your motherboard.
Exactly. You don't beg the motherboard to bend its physical rules just for you. You learn the rules of the system and you build on top of that unyielding foundation.
Because the physics of the machine are completely non-negotiable. And that rigidity is actually what allows complex software to exist in the first place.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right. I mean, if the rules change every time you pressed a key, the entire system would just crash. So Parwez is arguing that the universe operates on an identical premise. It's a strict, unbreakable set of laws.
Which introduces the core tension we're going to unpack today, because human beings absolutely hate unbreakable laws.
We despise them.
We do. We are desperately, endlessly trying to invent cheat codes.
Yeah, we want the reward without putting in the grueling effort of actually learning the system.
Precisely. So we'll dive into how humans construct these elaborate illusions to avoid dealing with reality, and how we can actually align ourselves with the true mechanics of the universe instead.
But to understand this operating system, we first have to clear up a massive historical misunderstanding about how it was supposedly built.
Oh, right. The creation timeline debate.
Yes. The battleground over how the universe was formed is centuries old. We really have to look at the infamous creation in 6 days narrative, which is found in verse 59.
It's a classic sticking point.
It is. This has historically been one of the most violently fought-over concepts between religious literalists on one side and modern scientists on the other.
And both sides seem completely locked in this, perpetual death match over it.
Oh, totally.
You have defensive literalists violently demanding that the universe was materialized in 6 literal 24-hour rotations of the Earth.
Right.
And then you have the dismissive critics looking at carbon dating, astrophysics, and the fossil record and saying, well, the science proves that's impossible, so throw the entire ancient text into the garbage.
And what makes Parwez's reading so provocative is his assertion that both of these factions are completely missing the point. They're both missing the structural principle being claimed here.
Because they're obsessing over the timeline.
Exactly. The obsession over the literal timeline has totally obscured the architectural reality that the text is trying to illustrate. He argues that taking this literally turns it into a primitive narrative.
A fairy tale.
Right. If we actually look at the Arabic used in verse 59, it mentions creation occurring in 6 Ayyam.
Ayyam.
Yeah, Ayyam. Now, conventionally, translators wrote that down as days, largely because it fit the simplest possible understanding for an ancient audience.
I see where the confusion starts then. Because if we look at the root of Ayyam, which is yam.
Right, yam.
My understanding of classical Arabic is that yam doesn't exclusively mean a literal day, right? It just means a span of time.
Yes, exactly.
And logically, a 24-hour rotation of the Earth wouldn't even make sense as a measurement of time before the Earth or the sun even existed to rotate.
It's a complete paradox.
It's a paradoxical measurement.
And that paradox is exactly what Parwez zeroes in on. Yam fundamentally means any defined period. It could be an era, a phase, an epoch, or a stage of development.
Okay, so a stage.
Yeah. So when the text speaks of the 6 Ayyam of creation, Parwez insists it is not providing a literal timetable for cosmological events. That's a misreading.
So what is it providing?
It is making a structural declaration. It's stating that ordered, functional creation is a graduated, staged process.
To build on that, it's remarkably similar to building physical infrastructure, isn't it?
Very much so.
Like, you cannot build the 50th floor of a high-rise before you have excavated the ground and poured the concrete foundation.
Nope. You'd have a disaster.
Or, to go back to the tech analogy, you can't deploy the user interface of an app before you've written the back-end database.
Right. There's a necessary sequence.
Each stage creates the necessary environment, the required substrate, really, for the next stage to even exist.
And Parwez connects this deeply to the concept of tartil.
Tartil.
Yeah, tartil implies a measured, deliberate sequence. You match the development of a system to its capacity to handle that development. You build the infrastructure layer by layer.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate for a moment here.
Go for it.
Because if we are looking at how traditionalists view this text, their argument almost always centers on the concept of omnipotence.
Oh, the unlimited power argument.
Exactly. If a creator is all-powerful, why go through stages at all? Why not instantaneous magical manifestation?
That's the trap.
Doesn't a staged step-by-step process imply a limitation on power? Like, why take 6 epochs when infinite power could accomplish it in a millisecond?
And that is the exact trap that Parwez attempts to dismantle. He points out that verse 59 essentially challenges 2 unproven assertions simultaneously.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first assertion is the one you just raised, the assumption that speed equals power.
Right.
We just naturally assume that if something takes time, it must be because the creator is weak.
Because we associate effort with limitation.
Exactly. And then the second assertion, usually coming from the purely materialist side, is that because evolution and cosmological development are undeniably gradual, it somehow proves there is no governing principle at all.
Ah, I see. The assumption being that if a process is slow and complex, it must be random and undirected.
Yes. But Parwez argues that productive order mathematically requires stages. This isn't a limitation. It is the very definition of how functional systems operate in reality.
So it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Completely. Moving from what the text calls atom, meaning nothingness or non-existence, into a functional reality means you must build substrates.
Give me an example.
Well, you cannot have biological life without first establishing chemical complexity.
Right.
And you cannot have complex chemistry without atomic stability. You cannot have atoms without a cooling universe. Stage 1 creates the literal physical substrate for stage 2.
It's so funny. We suffer from this tyranny of unproven assertions. We just assume a powerful entity would use magic to bypass physics.
Because it sounds more impressive in a story.
Right. But true systems engineering tells us that a perfectly designed system isn't one that pops into existence chaotically. It's one that logically, structurally builds upon itself.
Exactly.
So Parwez is rejecting the magical worldview entirely in favor of an architectural worldview.
Which naturally leads to the next massive question, right?
Which is,
if creation is this incredibly complex, staged, logical process, who or what is managing it? How is this operating system maintained once it is actually built?
that brings us to the linguistic deep dive regarding the concept of universal governance.
The famous throne.
Yes, the throne. Once the universe is built through these defined stages, verse 59 states the creator established himself on the throne. The Arabic phrase used is istawa al-arsh.
And we have to talk about the imagery that brings up.
Oh, absolutely. If you grew up anywhere near traditional religious storytelling, you probably have a very specific image in your head right now.
Yep.
A physical deity, perhaps an old man with a beard, sitting on a giant golden chair floating in the clouds.
The physicalization of abstract concepts is just a very common human tendency. We really struggle with complex systems, so we turn them into characters.
It's easier to process.
It is. But Parwez is ruthlessly mocking of these literalist interpretations. He points out the absurdity of historical debates. Like, there are actual ancient texts that seriously argued over the physical dimensions of this celestial chair.
Wait, seriously? Like, taking measurements?
Yes. Or they describe giant cosmic animals like massive goats holding up a watery sky where the throne floated.
Giant cosmic goats. Oh my God.
I know. Parwez views this as reducing a profound cosmological reality to a child's fairy tale.
It really highlights how quickly human beings will abandon rigorous systems thinking in favor of a comfortable fantasy. Like, we'd rather believe in space goats than learn physics.
Pretty much.
But if we strip away the giant goats and the golden chairs, we have to look at the socio-political linguistics of the time. What did these words actually mean to a 7th century audience when used in a political or structural context?
Right. So, Arsh in classical Arabic does not simply mean a piece of furniture meant for sitting. It means the seat of governance.
Okay.
It is a command and control center. Think of it like the crown in British politics or the Oval Office.
Oh, yeah, that's a great analogy.
When a news report says, the crown acted today, we understand they don't mean a physical piece of metal and jewels made a decision.
Right, the hat didn't sign a law.
Exactly. We understand it means the central authority, the overarching governance structure, exercised its power.
The center of authority. That makes total sense. And what about the word istawa? Because translators often render it as sat, which feeds right back into the physical chair imagery.
And that's a really reductive translation. Istawa is much richer than that. It basically means stable establishment.
Stable establishment.
Yes. It denotes settled, balanced, unwavering governance. If a ruler's power is shaky, if there's an active rebellion, or if their laws are constantly shifting around, their rule is not istawa.
Because it's chaotic.
Right. So when the text declares Ar-Rahman ala al-Arsh istawa, it is a monumental declaration of physics and sociology. It means the governance of the universe is utterly stable, deeply settled, and strictly law-governed.
Wow. So it's not arbitrary. The universe isn't waking up in a bad mood on a Tuesday and deciding that thermodynamics shouldn't work today.
No, it's consistent. And crucially, and this is where it hits human psychology the hardest, it means the laws of the universe are not subject to revision based on petition or negotiation.
That is a staggering realization.
It's terrifying for a lot of people.
Because negotiating is all humans do.
We love a loophole.
We do. We petition, we beg, we say, I know I built my civilization on a floodplain and ignored all ecological warnings, but please suspend the laws of hydrology just this once so my city doesn't wash away.
Just this one time, please.
Exactly. We desperately want the operating system to negotiate with us. We want a backdoor. But istawa ala al-Arsh is the universe saying, no, the governance is settled, the laws are fixed.
This is the ultimate statement of universal consistency. If you jump off a cliff, gravity will pull you down at a constant rate of acceleration.
Yep.
The universe simply does not care if you're considered a saint or a criminal by your peers. The law of gravity is settled governance.
Wait, let's pause there because there's a contradiction I need to figure out here.
Okay, what is it?
The verse doesn't just say a cold, calculating machine is on the throne. It specifically says Ar-Rahman is on the throne, the merciful one. How does Parwez reconcile this unyielding, non-negotiable law of physics with the concept of mercy? Because when I hear mercy, my mind immediately goes to a judge letting someone off the hook. I think of exceptions to the rule. I think of pity.
And this is perhaps Parwez's most brilliant intellectual synthesis. He completely redefines what mercy means when applied to a universal system.
Okay, lay it on me.
He argues that Ar-Rahman is not an emotional, sentimental deity who feels pity and bends the rules for favorites.
Yeah.
He defines Ar-Rahman as the productive operating principle of the universe.
The productive operating principle.
Yes, it is the systemic drive toward flourishing.
The systemic drive toward flourishing. Okay, I need to understand how he gets there linguistically. How does mercy become productivity?
Well, Parwez compares two words that are almost always paired together in these texts, Rahman and Rahim.
Right, you hear this together all the time.
Both derive from the exact same Arabic root, R-H-M. And fundamentally, this root means nourishment. Yeah. The literal biological origin of the word refers to a womb, a protected, specialized environment designed specifically to nourish life.
Wow, okay.
But the grammatical suffixes of the words Rahman and Rahim change how that nourishment operates in time and scale.
So if they both mean nourishment, what is the functional difference? Let's start with Rahim. How does Rahim operate?
Rahim implies gradual, continuous, unbroken nourishment. Think of a fetus growing in the womb.
Okay.
It is a slow, steady progression, day by day, cell by cell, building up over 9 months. It represents the constant, reliable supply of what is necessary to survive and grow incrementally.
So it's the slow burn. And then how does Rahman differ?
Rahman signifies the sudden qualitative leap. It is the explosive emergence of something entirely new and vastly more complex.
A leap.
Yeah. To explain this, Parwez explicitly references the work of Conway Lloyd Morgan.
The early 20th century scientist.
Yes. Morgan was an ethologist and psychologist who wrote a landmark book in 1923 called Emergent Evolution.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Morgan looked at evolutionary history and realized it wasn't always just a slow, steady climb. He proposed that at certain critical thresholds, things build up gradually, and then suddenly a qualitative leap occurs, and a system emerges that has entirely new properties if individual parts do not possess.
Like hydrogen and oxygen becoming water.
Yes. Perfect example.
Like you can study hydrogen gas and oxygen gas all day long, but nothing in them tells you that combining them will create a liquid that can put out fires. The wetness of water is an emergent property.
That is exactly it. That sudden leap, the emergence of a totally new level of reality, is what Parwez argues Rahman actually means.
That's fascinating.
So Rahim is the slow building of the foundation. Rahman is the sudden, overwhelming provision that elevates a system to a completely new stage of existence.
You know, Parwez uses an incredible analogy here in his notes to ground this in biology, doesn't he? The analogy of a mother's milk.
It is a profound illustration of the Rahim and Rahman dynamic as a programmed system, totally devoid of emotional whim.
Let's walk through it.
So, Parwez points out the automated genius of human biology. When a baby is born, the mother's initial milk, the colostrum, is relatively watery and high in specific antibodies.
Right.
Because the newborn's digestive system is incredibly weak, it simply cannot process heavy proteins or dense fats yet.
But the composition doesn't stay that way.
It doesn't. As the baby grows, day by day, week by week, the chemical composition of the mother's milk automatically alters.
On its own.
Yes. It reduces its water content, it increases in density, fat, and complex nutrients. The mother's body reads the biological signals from the infant and perfectly matches its output to the baby's developing digestive capacity.
That is mind-blowing. Like, a mother isn't consciously mixing a formula in a lab based on a chart on her fridge.
No, she's not.
She isn't deciding, I feel merciful today, I will add more fat to the milk. Her biology is functioning as an automated, highly calibrated system of nourishment.
Exactly, and that gradual, daily, automated matching of provision to need. That is the Rahim principle.
A steady supply.
Right. But the sudden qualitative leaps in the baby's development, like the moment its neurological system crosses a threshold and it gains the capacity for complex speech, or the sudden leap in cognitive awareness, that explosive emergence is the Rahman principle.
So bringing this back to the concept of the throne, when the text says Ar-Rahman is established on the throne, it's declaring that the universe is governed by an operating system inherently pre-programmed to nourish and evolve life through logical stages.
Yes.
It's not the mercy of a judge granting a pardon, it's the mercy of immense productivity. The universe is literally rigged in favor of life and growth, provided you understand the laws and follow the stages.
The merciful one on the throne is a description of a universe engineered for flourishing.
Yeah.
And this is the vital catch, it demands engagement.
There's always a catch.
Right, the mother's milk is available, but the baby still has to expend the physical energy to feed. The laws of agriculture and soil chemistry are ever present, but the farmer still has to do the grueling work of plowing the field. The universe provides the system of nourishment, but it absolutely demands effort.
And if you're listening to this and wondering, okay, so the universe is a strict productive machine, why does this matter to my life today? Well, that brings us to how human beings actively try to avoid this machine.
We try so hard to avoid it.
We really do. Historically, we have a massive problem with effort. The universe runs on these strict laws that demand constant evolutionary work. To build a functional civilization, you have to align with cause and effect, you have to innovate, and you have to face incredibly harsh realities.
Which is exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Right.
So how do we cope with an unyielding reality? We invent idols.
This is where verse 60 comes in.
Uh,
The text observes that when people are told to submit to this rational, unyielding system to Ar-Rahman, they violently refuse.
They hate it.
They balk at it. Their response is, no, we prefer the gods of our ancestors. We prefer our traditional idols. And Parwez offers a devastating sociological critique of this phenomenon.
So sharp.
He has a fundamental question. Why do humans love idols? And he means this broadly. Whether we are talking about literal stone statues in antiquity, or dead historical saints, or even modern human-made ideologies and infallible authorities.
And the answer Parwez gives is chillingly simple. Dead things don't make demands.
It is the ultimate psychological comfort zone.
It really is.
An idol, by definition, is static. A stone statue or a highly romanticized deceased historical figure will never look you in the eye and tell you that your socioeconomic behavior is corrupt.
Right.
It will never demand that you restructure your society to distribute resources more equitably. It will never force you to undergo the painful process of actually changing your life.
Because you can project absolutely anything you want onto an idol.
Anything at all.
If I have a stone statue, I can bow to it, offer it a bowl of fruit, perform a specific chant, and then walk away feeling entirely spiritually validated. I have done my duty.
Check that box.
Exactly. I can then go right back to exploiting my workers or ignoring the crumbling infrastructure of my city, but my ego is safe because the statue didn't object.
You didn't say a word.
The Rahman operating system, the unyielding law of cause and effect, is terrifyingly dangerous to our egos. The idol is safe.
Parwez refers to this as the psychology of the sleeping pill.
Oh, the sleeping pill. That's so accurate.
Traditional religion, whenever it becomes divorced from systems thinking, often turns concepts like thawab, which translates as reward, into a transactional cheat code.
A cheat code.
Yeah. People want the psychological comfort of being saved or blessed simply by performing an isolated ritual. They desperately want the reward without putting in the multi-generational, grueling work of actual civilizational progress.
It's the ultimate expression of human laziness and entitlement, isn't it?
Utterly.
It's like saying, I don't want to study the complex laws of physics, material science, and engineering to build a structurally sound bridge. I want to build a flimsy bridge out of cheap materials and then perform a ritual so the river god doesn't knock it down.
And how well does that work?
Right. And when the bridge inevitably collapses and people die, we blame the river god's wrath rather than confronting our own failure to understand the settled governance of the universe.
We must ask then, why do human authorities and institutions so often encourage this mindset? Why do structures of power often prefer a superstitious populace?
Oh, that's the dark side of it.
Parwez argues it is because superstitious dogma relies on keeping the masses asleep. If the people believe that their poverty, their suffering, or the rampant corruption of their society is simply the will of the gods, or a spiritual test that can only be solved through more ritual prayer,
Then they'll never revolt.
exactly, they will never rise up and attempt to change the socioeconomic architecture.
So idolatry isn't just a theological mistake. It's a highly effective tool for socioeconomic suppression.
A weapon, really.
If an authority figure can convince you that the cheat code works, you won't ever learn how to actually code. You won't learn the operating system. You'll just keep feeding coins into their machine.
It's a grift.
It is. Aligning with the true universal governance means waking up from the sleeping pill. It means facing reality with your eyes wide open, recognizing that cause and effect are utterly real and that no amount of ritual will save a society that actively ignores the laws of flourishing.
A functional civilization, Parwez concludes, cannot possibly be built on the foundation of the sleeping pill. Yeah. To wake up and engage with the real world, a society needs to understand the tools the universe actually provides.
The real tool.
They have to stop looking for magical interventions and start looking at the tangible infrastructure around them.
Okay, so if we're throwing away the cheat codes and the sleeping pills, what are we left with? Verse 61 brings in some breathtaking astronomical imagery to answer this.
The astronomy verses are incredible.
They really are. It speaks of the sky with its constellations, called buruj, its lamp, the sun, and its luminous moon. And again, if we just read this as pretty poetry about the night sky, we miss the engineering manual hidden inside it.
Parwez pulls a fascinating linguistic detail from the Arabic regarding this astronomy.
Oh, about the sun and moon.
Yeah. The text describes the sun with words denoting inherent, self-generating light words like siraj, which means a blazing, active lamp, or diya.
Okay.
But the moon is described with a completely different word, nur, which denotes reflected or borrowed light.
Which is scientifically accurate, of course. I mean, the sun generates massive amounts of light and heat through nuclear fusion. The moon generates absolutely nothing. It merely reflects the sun's light.
Right.
But Parwez takes it deeper than just an interesting ancient science fact, doesn't he? He looks at the Arabic word for moon, which is qamar.
The root of qamar shares a direct linguistic connection with words associated with gambling or deception, specifically makamra.
Gambling, that is such a leap.
It seems like it. But why would the moon be associated with gambling? Because the moon is essentially a beautiful illusion.
Oh, I see.
It looks incredibly powerful. It commands the night sky, but it's actually a beggar. It is borrowing light from the sun. It has absolutely no inherent power of its own.
Right.
And Parwez relates this to gambling because gambling is an illusion of generating wealth. It produces nothing of actual value. It merely shifts existing wealth around through chance, manipulation, and deception.
So the moon functions as a metaphor for an idol or a false socioeconomic authority.
Exactly.
It looks powerful. It looks like it's generating light and value, but it's just reflecting something else. It's a trick of the eye.
The mirage.
Yeah. And if you build your civilization chasing the moon, chasing borrowed light, building economies on financial speculation and rent-seeking rather than actual value creation, you're going to fail. You need the inherent productive fusion-level power of the sun.
That's the socioeconomic application.
But beyond the metaphor, Parwez argues these celestial bodies represent actual, tangible infrastructure too, right?
They do. Let's look at the systemic purpose of the Buruj, the constellations. They are not positioned up there just to look aesthetically pleasing or to provide a basis for reading your daily horoscope.
Obviously not.
In the context of early civilization and continuing up to the modern era, they are the vital infrastructure of spatial navigation.
Navigation?
Yes. They are the fixed reference points that allow humanity to cross vast oceans without getting lost. They are how trade routes are established across featureless deserts.
The original GPS.
Exactly. And the sun and the moon. They provide the infrastructure of time measurement. They allow a society to organize labor, track agricultural seasons, predict tidal shifts, and structure a highly complex economy.
And the most crucial part about this infrastructure, and this is a massive blow to hierarchical systems, is that it is universally accessible.
So important.
The universe does not hide its most critical tools from specific social classes. The stars do not shine only for the wealthy elite. The sun does not rise exclusively for a specific religious group. The laws of celestial mechanics, navigation, and timekeeping are available to literally any human being anywhere on Earth who is willing to look up, observe the patterns, and do the intellectual work of understanding them.
Parwez sees this as the ultimate democratization of reality, and it forms the absolute foundation of what he calls the law of requital, or mukafat iamal.
Mukafat iamal.
All because the universe's governance is stable, because Ar-Rahman is established on the throne, cause and effect run uniformly across every era, every geography, and every society. The law does not run slower for a privileged community.
No VIP lines in physics.
Exactly. It doesn't offer VIP access to those with the most social power.
To bring back the bridge analogy from earlier, if an empire possesses massive social power and wealth, but builds a bridge using flawed mathematics and cheap steel, that bridge will collapse.
Down it goes.
The laws of physics will not give them a pass just because they are wealthy or because they prayed fervently before cutting the ribbon. And conversely, if a marginalized, impoverished community diligently studies the laws of agriculture, hydrology, and structural engineering and aligns their work with the Rahman operating system, they will thrive. The universe doesn't care about human hierarchies. It only cares about how accurately you interact with its laws.
Because the physics of structural integrity demand respect. The law of requital simply states that actions have inherent, inescapable, non-negotiable consequences.
Action and reaction.
Yes. If you use the universal tools rationally, you progress. If you ignore them, or try to override them with superstition and cheat codes, you perish. The tools for survival, spatial orientation, time measurement, cause and effect are laid out for everyone. What a community decides to do with those universally available tools dictates their survival or extinction.
Okay, so setting the stage, we have a universe built in logical stages. We have a settled, unyielding operating system that demands constant effort. We have universally accessible tools for navigation and measurement, and a strict law of cause and effect.
A complete system.
But we have to address biology. How does a functional society continuously adapt to these permanent laws? Human beings are not algorithms. We get tired, we forget, we experience cognitive overload. We need a rhythm to sustain this effort.
And this brings Parwez to his final synthesis regarding the cognitive cycle. Verse 62 introduces a seemingly simple phenomenon immediately after mentioning the sun and moon.
He who made the night and day in alternation.
Right. Why is the mundane alternation of day and night mentioned here as the climax to this vast systemic framework?
Again, Parwez insists it's not just a poetic description of a pretty sunset. He argues this represents the biological substrate of the human cognitive cycle.
We are biological creatures.
Right, we are not machines that can run at 100% processing power indefinitely. We require a highly specific rhythm to function rationally and build civilizations.
The text highlights two key concepts tied directly to the day and night cycle: Zikr and Shukr.
Now, normally those are just translated as religious terms, right?
Yeah, usually in traditional religious context, Dhikr is translated simply as remembrance or repetitive chanting, and Shukr as gratitude or just saying thank you.
Right.
But in a systems engineering context, Parwez elevates these terms. He translates Dhikr as the act of activating the rational operating system, calling to mind the laws of the universe, and processing complex information.
And Shukr.
Shukr is defined as generating actual, tangible results, actualizing potential, and creating a state of deep appreciation through productive output.
And neuroscientifically, you cannot do both of those things simultaneously without a break. Night and day provide the physical environmental template for this cycle.
Indeed.
Night is the time for rest and consolidation. Your brain literally clears out toxins and consolidates the memories of the day while you sleep. It is the time to process what you've learned, that is the biological Dhikr.
The internal processing.
Then day is the time for active engagement, testing hypotheses against reality, and doing the physical labor of building civilization, that is the Shukr.
If you look at this sociologically, the implications are massive. A community that never rests, that is constantly agitated and reactive, cannot consolidate its knowledge.
They just burn out.
They burn out completely. They become purely reactive instead of strategic. Conversely, a community that never acts, that stays perpetually in the night of passivity, just contemplating, theorizing, or sleeping, cannot test its hypotheses against reality.
They produce nothing.
Right, they produce no shukr, no tangible results. The alternation of night and day is the physical, biological template for a productive socioeconomic architecture. You require the rhythm of permanence and change.
The way Parwez scales this concept up is fascinating to me. He relates this alternation to the broader concept of civilizational death and rebirth.
The seasons of a society.
Exactly. Just because a civilization is currently in a dark night or a winter of oppression, ignorance, or economic stagnation doesn't mean it is permanently dead.
Think of a massive oak tree in the dead of winter. It looks completely dead.
Yeah.
The branches are bare, the leaves are gone.
It's the skeleton.
But the potential for life is still there, safely stored in the roots. The underlying laws of biology haven't vanished. They are simply in a consolidation phase.
A long night.
Right? When the environmental conditions change, when spring finally arrives, the tree blossoms again. A society might go through a brutal dark age, but the potential for a qualitative leap, that explosive Rahman principle of sudden emergence, is always present if they wake up and align themselves with the system's laws once again.
Let's synthesize this profound journey Parwez has taken us on today. We started by exploring how Parwez explodes the myth of instant magical creation.
Boom, right from the start.
He replaces it with a universe governed by staged, logical development, where substrates must be built before complexity can emerge. We saw that the throne isn't a magical chair in the sky, but a powerful declaration of stable, settled governance. A universe run by unbreakable, non-negotiable laws of cause and effect.
We examined his critique of how humans try to escape the grueling work demanded by these laws through the comforting illusions of idolatry.
The sleeping pill.
Yes. We invent cheat codes, transactional rituals, and sleeping pills to avoid socioeconomic responsibility. And we saw how true civilizational success requires waking up from that illusion and utilizing the spatial, temporal, and biological infrastructures that are provided equally to everyone.
The ultimate takeaway here, as Parwez frames it, is that the merciful one on the throne is not a theological title at all. It is a precise description of a universe fundamentally engineered for productive flourishing.
That's beautifully said.
A functional society, what the text calls Ar-Rahman, is one that completely aligns itself with this permanent, observable reality, rather than relying on contingent, human-made dogmas, hierarchies, or superstitions.
Parwez's argument ultimately boils down to this. Knowledge is only valuable when it is applied to the systems we actually live in. We have to look at the underlying architecture of our physical and social world and ask if we are working with the operating system or fruitlessly fighting against it.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. We talked extensively about how the universe operates like an operating system and how human beings love to invent cheat codes to bypass the work.
We all do it.
So look closely at your own life. Look at the organizations you work for or the communities you live in. Are you operating based on the stable, observable laws of cause and effect? Are you putting in the staged, gradual effort required to build a solid foundation? Or have you secretly built an idol? Have you constructed a comfortable delusion, an unquestioned routine, or perhaps an empty vanity metric in your business that makes you feel safe and spiritually or professionally validated while actually requiring zero real progress?
Are you demanding that the operating system bend to your will, or are you doing the hard work of learning to write the code? Think about it.
It really is the difference between perpetually chasing the moon's borrowed light and learning the physics required to build your own lamp.
That's a great way to put it.
That is the perfect place to leave it. We hope this breakdown of Parwez's systems engineering approach gave you a completely new lens through which to view these concepts. That's all we have for today's deep dive. We'll see you next time.